Okay, let's do the birth of Chinese civilization. All right, let me get you some room on this screen. Let me make this a little bit bigger so we can see it nice and clear. There we go. And we're off. All right, so first we're going to read through the land part, and then we'll start answering questions together. The land of China. Ancient civilizations developed along large rivers in China. Hold on just one second. Let me mute the music so that I can't hear it, but you can still hear it. Hope you like my Chinese music. Ancient civilizations developed along the large rivers in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and India. In China, civilization developed hundreds of years later along the Huanghe. Now, the Huanghe is a river, okay? Along the Huanghe. They should have put along the Huanghe River. In Chinese, Huanghe means yellow river. China has undergone many changes in its long history, but it remains a powerful force in the modern world. The Huanghe begins in the western mountains of China and flows to the Pacific Ocean. Stretching east across China, the river carries layers of rich yellow soil called less. The less is spread downstream, making fertile soil for farming. The river's water appears yellow because of the soil it carries, giving the river its name, Yellow River. Now, less is just the same thing as silt. Okay, it's just a little lighter brown. It's almost a yellow kind of a dirt, but it's silt. So the story is the same. Flooding brought silt. Silt made the ground fertile, and fertile ground is great for farming. And so hunters and gatherers, as they wandered in, they settled, and civilization grew. Early farmers grew large amounts of food on small plots of land because of the rich less. This made the Huanghe Valley a major producer of wheat in the ancient world. The Huanghe was a great help to the people who settled on its banks. However, it has also caused problems such as terrible floods. The Chinese have recorded more than 1,500 floods since 600 BC. Millions of people have died as a result of these floods. As a result, the Chinese people have come to call the river China's sorrow. Why do they call it China's sorrow? Well, it's a result of millions of people dying because of the flood. Early people moved south from the Huanghe to settle near the Xiang or Yangtze River. Now here's a second river, but it's one river. Two names, one river. Changjiang, Yangtze. Okay, so we're only talking about two major rivers here in China. The Huanghe is the first, and the Changjiang is the second. This river also flows from west to east across China. On its way to the East China Sea, it flows through canyons and broad plains. The Changjiang is a long river. The only rivers in the world that match its length are the Amazon in South America and the Nile in Africa. So that makes the Changjiang River the longest river in Asia, okay? Because Amazon is in South America and Nile is in Africa, so the Changjiang is in Asia. So it's the longest river in Asia. Similar to the Huanghe, the Changjiang deposits rich soil along its banks. Farmers grew rice there. The Changjiang also served as a major waterway for trade and transportation. Now, everything we're going over here in rivers, the land of China, this is all good geography stuff, all right, for grapes notes. So pay attention and jot some of these things down for your grapes notes. We may use them later if there's time. Okay, mountains and deserts. Despite these fertile river valleys, there's the phone. Let's see if I can do this. Okay, I figured out how to pause my recording. That was a phone call from the principal. No biggie. All right, where was I? Mountains and deserts. Despite these fertile valleys, only about 1/10 of China's land can be farmed. Much of the land consists of mountains and deserts. Mountain chains include the Himalaya to the southwest, and in the west are both the Kunlun Shan and the Tian Shan. Now those are mountains, okay? So it says mountain chains right here include the Himalaya in the southwest, and then in the west are Kunlun Shan and Tian Shan. Now I know that those are mountains because the whole sentence is only about mountain chains, okay? The next sentence is going to be about the deserts. You see, much of the land consists of mountains and deserts. We have a sentence about mountains, and now we have a sentence about deserts. A vast rocky desert known as the Gobi lies east of the Tian Shan. If you look closely at the map, you can see all of that. These rugged geographic features isolated China from the rest of the world for centuries. The mountains and deserts acted like walls around the country. So imagine if this is China. Let me draw on this map real quick. Okay, if this is China here, all right, you've got deserts to the north, you've got mountains to the west, you've got mountains to the south. So really, it's hard to get in and out of China except in and out of the sea, and they can control that. So China grew up pretty much isolated from the rest of the other civilizations. Here, down here is India, all right? Back here was Persia. Way back here is Greece, way back. So China was pretty much isolated, and that's what it says. These rugged geographic features isolated China from the rest of the world for centuries. All right, now let's go down to the first Chinese dynasties. Oh, I didn't finish that paragraph. The mountains and deserts acted like walls around the country. Travel to and from China was difficult. As a result, China had little contact with other civilizations. The culture they developed was unique and independent. They referred to their land as the Middle Kingdom. They believed it was the center of the world. The first Chinese dynasty. Archaeologists have found clay pots and cups dating back thousands of years in the Huanghe Valley. They show that the Huanghe Valley was the birthplace of Chinese civilization. Question: where did archaeologists find clay pots that were thousands of years old? Answer: can you see it? Right here, Huanghe Valley. We're going to put that here. Dang. There, Huanghe Valley. I cannot type today. Right, myths and legends. Early Chinese people created myths and legends to explain the creation of the world. Similar to other early cultures, these myths often tell about great heroes. One Chinese hero was Yu the Great. In the myth, Yu chases away the dragon responsible for the Huanghe floods. He then digs the first channels. He digs the first channels to control the Huanghe's floodwaters. Legend also says that Yu founded China's first dynasty, the Xia. That's how you pronounce Xia, Xia, around 2000 BC. However, there is no historical evidence for the Xia dynasty. So they don't know for sure if it's a legend or if it was a real dynasty. Who was the first mythical leader of China's first dynasty? Well, this guy named Yu the Great. Okay, not me the Great, Yu the Great. And you see there's two little dots over the U, and that might have something to do with the pronunciation. Maybe it's Yu the Great, not Yu. I don't know. I'm not sure what the two dots mean. Who were the Shang? Written records establish the Shang as China's first dynasty. Shang's kings ruled from about 750 BC to 1045 BC. When archaeologists unearthed ruins of walls and buildings, they discovered that the Shang built the first cities in China. One of these cities was Anyang, the capital. At the center of the city was a palace and a temple. Surrounding these were public buildings and the homes of government officials. Other homes and workshops were outside the city's center. How do we know that the Shang was really China's first dynasty? Well, what's the evidence here? If you look closely, all right, it's not the cities, it's the written records. Okay, written records established that the Shang was the first dynasty. So we're going to go with written records. Right, scroll down to 2. The king was the most powerful person in Shang China. He was a political, religious, and military leader. When the Shang kingdom began, it controlled a small area of northern China. The Shang eventually conquered neighboring areas and ruled most of the people of the Huanghe Valley. Now notice this is good politics stuff here about what the king did and how they conquered other neighboring areas and created a dynasty. What river valley did the Shang dynasty control? Now notice, you're not going to find the words river valley, you just find the words Huanghe Valley. All right, you just have to remember Huanghe is the name of the river. And there it is right there. If we want to draw it, we can. Let's draw it blue because it's a river. It starts way back here somewhere. Come on. And all the way up there and then all the way out to there. And down here is the Changjiang River right there, which starts even farther back, all the way here on the other side of the key, goes off the map, comes back on the map, and goes out to there. So there's your two river valleys. Now, what was my question? What river valley did the Shang dynasty control? Well, it looked to me like they controlled both of them, but according to the paragraph, it's the Huanghe. And you always want to make sure that you take your answer from the paragraph, not from something else. All right, let's bring number 3 up. Large armies defended the Shang borders. Kings appointed warlords, military leaders with their own armies. Well, there's your definition of warlords right there. Military leaders with their own armies. So, back up. Kings appointed warlords to govern territories. The warlords helped the Shang kings retain their power. Warlords and other officials made up the upper class. They were the aristocrats, meaning they were people of noble birth and wealth came from the land they owned. So question, what two groups of people made up the aristocrats of Shang dynasty or Shang society? It says right here, they were the aristocrats, so we need to find out who the they were. And it doesn't, you don't want to go this direction. It's not noble birth and wealth, okay? That's what aristocrats are. Who were the two groups that made up the aristocrats? Well, right here it is, warlords and other officials. So we're going to go with that. Warlords and other officials. Bring up number 4, highlight that, turn it yellow. Number 4, the majority of Shang China's people were farmers, but there were also merchants, artisans, and slaves. Farmers lived in rural villages and worked the aristocrats' land. They raised sheep, cattle, chicken, and millet, wheat, and rice. Okay, society. That's good society information for your grades notes. True or false, Shang farmers owned their own land. What do you think? It says right here, farmers lived in rural villages and worked the aristocrats' land. All right, and up here, we said that aristocrats' wealth came from the land they owned, so I was going to call this false. Shang farmers did not own their own land. Okay, 5. The people of Shang China worshipped many gods. The gods were both admired and feared. The people believed the gods could bring good or bad fortune. Gifts were offered to the gods. Legend explained that the gods lived in the mountains, rivers, and seas. That's good religion stuff right there about their gods. Now, why were the gods feared? Well, it says here the gods were admired and feared, but what's the evidence in the paragraph to tell me why they were feared? Well, right here, the gods can bring good or bad fortune. Well, if a god can bring bad fortune, that's a good reason to fear that god. We're going to put here because gods could. Because gods could bring good or bad fortune. Now, question 6 is here, but paragraph 6 is down here. So we're going to scroll down and read it, and then we'll scroll back up and answer it. The Chinese also honored their ancestors or long-dead family members. Right, there's your definition for ancestors, long-dead family members. They, not the ancestors, but the Chinese, okay, they made offerings and asked their ancestors to help in hard times. Even today, many Chinese pay respect to their ancestors by burning small paper copies of food, clothing, and other items. These bits of paper represent things their ancestors might need in the afterlife. Question, who else besides gods could help the people? Well, what's your answer? The answer is pretty right there. It's ancestors. Ancestors help the people. The dead ancestors. Well, you have to be dead to be an ancestor, I guess. Since the definition of ancestors is long dead family members. Okay, seeking guidance from the ancestors. Religion and government were linked in Shang China. Shang kings believed they received their power from the gods and their wisdom from their ancestors. Therefore, they consulted both the gods and their ancestors before making important decisions. The kings used oracle bones to ask for help. A priest would scratch the king's questions onto the bone. For example, the king might ask, "Will I win the battle?" The priest heated the oracle bones over a fire until they cracked. The priest would then interpret the pattern of the cracks to find the answers from the gods or ancestors of the king. All right. Now I want you to notice here that religion and politics can sometimes be very hard to separate, because if they believe that the gods approved of the kings, and so that sort of mixed the religion and politics together. Who did the kings look to for guidance? Well, gods and ancestors. Okay, number 2. The ancient Chinese communicated in writing through pictographs and ideographs. Pictographs are characters that represent objects, and ideographs link 2 or more pictographs to express an idea. Well, right there is your definition of pictographs and ideographs. Okay, so you can use that for your chart in the vocabulary assignment. All right. This system of Chinese writing, this Chinese system of writing, is not based on an alphabet, because alphabets use characters that represent sounds. In Chinese writing system, most characters stand for entire words. So how is Chinese writing different from ours? Okay, they don't use an alphabet. They use characters that stand for words. Okay? Okay, let's do Shang Arts. The Shang dynasty produced many bronze objects. Beautiful works of art were cast in bronze. Artisans made clay molds in several parts. Then they carved designs into the clay. The parts of the mold were joined together and melted bronze was poured in. Once the bronze cooled, the clay mold was removed. Bronze objects included sculptures, daggers, vases, cups, and urns. Urns were used to serve food in ceremonies honoring Shang ancestors. Chinese artists also carved statues from ivory and jade. Artisans crafted vases and dishes from kaolin, which is a fine white clay. Shang farmers raised silkworms, so weavers could use the silk to create colorful clothing for aristocrats. So over here in Shang Arts, I want you to list at least 4 materials that the Shang artists used to make things. Well, I mean, right off the bat, I see they used bronze. Now just use your down key, okay? Don't press enter at the end of the word. Just go down, because I've already given you 4 bullets where you can type it in. So you don't need to make the box any larger. So anyway, there was bronze. Let's see, what else did they use? They used ivory. They used jade. Look at that, I pressed enter when I told you not to. And they used silk. All right, so bronze, ivory, jade, and silk. Now there's more than 4 things, so your 4 might not be exactly like my 4, but that's okay. All right, the Zhou, China's longest dynasty. According to legend, the last Shang ruler was a terrible tyrant. The people turned against him. Wu Wang, an aristocrat, led rebels in a fight to overthrow the Shang government. In 1045 BC, Wu achieved victory and declared a new dynasty, the Zhou. The Zhou ruled China longer than any other dynasty in Chinese history, for more than 800 years. Question: why did the people rebel against the last Shang ruler? Well, did you catch that? Right here, he was a terrible tyrant, so they didn't like him. We're going to take it right out of the page. He was a terrible tyrant. All right, and there's your map of the Shang, or the Zhou dynasty empire. How did the Zhou rule China? Zhou kings governed China in a similar manner to those of the Shang. The king ruled with the help of a bureaucracy. A bureaucracy is made up of officials who carry out government tasks. There is another definition for you right there for bureaucracy. The king also organized an army to conquer weaker kingdoms nearby. So, what's a bureaucracy? Well, I gave it to you already. Officials who carry out government tasks. So we're going to put that right in here. Too many R's. Turn that yellow. Bring up number 2. All right, number 2. The Zhou kingdom grew larger than the Shang. The king divided his kingdom into territories, and loyal aristocrats managed their local governments. These positions were hereditary, which means that when a governing aristocrat died, a son or family member took over governing the territory. Question: who managed local governments for the king? It says here, the king divided his kingdom into territories, and loyal aristocrats managed their local governments. So, loyal aristocrats. Bring number 3 back up. In the Zhou dynasty, people still believed the king was their representative to the gods. As a result, Zhou kings performed religious ceremonies to please the gods. They also claimed that kings ruled China because they had the mandate of heaven. Now pay attention to this mandate of heaven stuff. Number 3, in Zhou society, who was the high priest? Well, who is the representative to the gods? Right here. Okay, the king is. The king is their representative. Who's performing religious ceremonies? Okay, the Zhou kings perform religious ceremonies. So who's the high priest? Okay, well, I'd say the king was. King is the high priest. Now, mandate of heaven. Let's scroll down and take a look at this. The right to rule. The mandate of heaven is the belief that the gods approved of the king who ruled China. It stated, now the it right here is mandate of heaven, okay, this idea, okay, this idea, the mandate of heaven stated that the gods chose a wise and good person to rule and that he would lead the people well. Question: what kind of person did the gods choose to be ruler according to the mandate of heaven? What kind of person was he? Well, he was a wise and good person. Number 2, the mandate of heaven taught the Zhou people to believe the king must rule by the proper way, or Tao. So Tao is a Chinese word for the way, the right way, the good way. His duty was to honor and please the gods. Whose duty? The Tao's or the king's? The king's duty. The king's duty was to honor and please the gods. The people could judge whether or not the king was doing a good job. If there was a natural disaster or a bad harvest, the people believed the king had failed to please the gods and then could be replaced. So how did the people know whether or not the king was doing a good job of pleasing the gods? Well, it all depended on how many natural disasters these people suffered. And if they suffered too many natural disasters or bad harvests, then the king must be doing something wrong. So they would overthrow the king and get him a new king. All right? So, how would they know? It was whether or not too many disasters. Okay, whether or not there were too many disasters. That's how they would know. No disasters, good king. Too many disasters, bad king. Technology and trade. The Chinese developed new systems to irrigate the land under the Zhou kings. Chinese farmers had always relied on rain, but irrigation systems gave them a reliable water supply. More crops were grown than ever before. China's trade increased during the Zhou dynasty. Pieces of Chinese silk have been discovered in Central Asia and even in Greece. Question: how do we know that the Chinese people traded with other civilizations outside of China? Well, it's because, where did they find silk? Pieces of silk have been found where? They've been found all the way over in Greece, which I told you is a really long way away through mountains and deserts. Thousands of miles. War between the states. The Zhou's ruling aristocrats grew more powerful and took control of their territories away from the king. In the 400s BC, they began to fight for power. Who's the they who began to fight for power? Look at it. These right here, the ruling aristocrats. They grew more powerful and took control of their territories away from the king. They began to fight each other for power. The wars lasted almost 200 years. Each aristocrat formed his own state, so this conflict is called the period of warring states. 1. In 400 BC, who began to fight for power? Well, I just highlighted it for you. The aristocrats did. Number 2. Farmers were forced to become soldiers. They used swords, spears, and crossbows. Over time, the warriors began riding horses. To make riding easier, the Chinese developed the saddle and stirrup. Soldiers could ride into battle while using weapons. These long wars eventually led to a new dynasty in China. What new inventions did the wars lead to? Well, I think it's that saddle and stirrup, which I think is pretty cool. So did you know that the Chinese invented the saddle and stirrup combination? Nice. All right, we're almost done. I'm going to scroll down here and take a look at this comparison chart. And what I want you to do is look at the characteristic, and you're going to use your draw tool to put a check mark either in the Shang column or the Zhou column or the both column. Okay, but not 2 columns or 3 columns. 1 column, 1 check mark. So now which one of these dynasties built the first cities? Well, was it the Shang or the Zhou? Well, if we scroll all the way up, we'll find out that the Shang built the first cities. Let's go all the way up here and see if I'm right. Who were the Shang? Written records. When archaeologists on Route 1, they discovered that the Shang, there it is, they discovered that the Shang built the first cities in China. So we scroll back down here, turn on my draw tool right there, and put a check mark in Shang. Which dynasty or which empire was larger and lasted longer? Well, if you remember, we scrolled up here, right there. The Zhou ruled China longer than any other dynasty in Chinese history, more than 800 years. So we need to check mark right here for Zhou. Now, what about located in the Huanghe River Valley near 2 major rivers? Well, let's take a look at the maps. Here is a map of the Zhou Empire, and there's the Huanghe River Valley. And here is a map of the Shang Empire, and again, I showed you once before, there's the Huanghe River Valley. So where is our check mark going to go? Check mark's going to go in both. So that's how you do that. So what I want you to do is read back through the rest of these and put a check mark in one of the boxes on each row, and then you'll be finished. All right, talk to you later. Bye.